Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Down Syndrome Center podcast. As always, I am your host, Dr. Kishore Velody. And as always, we love getting listener emails with topics that you request for us to cover on the podcast. And today's podcast, we are so happy to address this really common issue on nutrition in Down syndrome, because this particular emailer had experienced an adult so far who has had some issues with ingrained eating habits that have come in over the years. And so I reached out to our dietitian, Shannon Frizzell, who is with us today from our Down Syndrome Center to answer this question. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be back again with everyone. Like Dr. Velody was saying, my name is Shannon Frizzell, and I am the registered dietitian that works at our Down Syndrome Center here in Western Pennsylvania. Kind of what I do at our center is I try to teach and empower our patients to make healthier nutrition and lifestyle choices.
That's fantastic. And it's something that, as we get to the end of the podcast, I'm going to let our listeners know, something we would definitely love to add into our pediatric component of our center and be able to continue on the adult side. So we'll get to that here at the end. But thank you so much. Shannon, remind our listeners again, what is it that really draws you to this population? Why do you want to work with our center? Why do you enjoy working with our center?
I just really enjoy working with our patients and their families, like working with such dedicated families and our patients. There really is no like nicer, more fun population to work with. And it's just been really enjoyable for me to kind of make connections with all of our patients over the past few years.
That's awesome. And I definitely don't want to betray any kind of confidence in the emailer. So I'm not going to read the email verbatim. We'll just kind of summarize it as we go through. So let me start by asking you this question. Do you ever see issues in adults with Down syndrome who have developed maybe some unhealthy, very much ingrained eating habits over the years?
Yes, this is something that is extremely common, especially as we kind of get into adulthood with our adult patients, that some of these maybe unhealthier habits have persisted from childhood through adulthood. And it's very easy for our patients. We'll kind of call it like a groove while we're in clinic together, but to get into the groove. And sometimes we get into a groove of maybe choices that aren't the healthiest for us.
How does that happen? So let me tell you from like my experience in the pediatric side, we'll see some kids who right off the bat, when they start eating solid foods, they have an intense, I like this, but I don't like that kind of reaction to certain foods. Do you think that there's something that's happening early on in life that just makes that become more of a routine, that groove you were talking about, that makes it harder to break in adulthood? And what would be your suggestion, perhaps even to younger parents? Like, how do we not let that groove start to take effect?
Yeah, I think one of the things about this, that how this kind of comes about, is we really like to get into the groove of things, and we like when things are predictable. And chicken fingers and potato chips are a little bit more predictable than maybe, let's say, like fresh fruits and vegetables.
Sure.
We could get like you could get apples in the fall and they might taste a certain way and feel a certain way and be crisp and wonderful. And then, have an apple at a different time of the year. And even though it looks the same, it tastes completely different. And sometimes that unpredictability for our patients is something that's like, nope, I'd rather not deal with that. I want to stick to my chicken fingers that are crunchy and delicious and feel the same and taste the same every single time.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this on a prior podcast, so listeners, you can go back and see, but this desire for sameness, it's something that we will see many times maybe misdiagnosed as OCD, but it really isn't. It's just this desire for sameness that we see. Some of you have even reached out with emails to me in the past about, why does my loved one with Down syndrome like to watch the same movie over and over and over again? It's that desire for, okay, I know what's coming. There's a predictability here that maybe doesn't exist in the world in general. And so we're seeing this, and we're talking about today on this podcast, we see this with food often. This particular emailer was mentioning to us about how their adult with Down syndrome loves to eat the same foods all the time, but they're always picking, it seems like, unhealthy options. And you mentioned like chicken tenders. This particular listener was saying that it was chicken patties with ketchup, and that's all they wanted. Why is that, and how would you address that?
Yeah, some of the things that we do to like try and work with this is, since these habits are something that we've kind of built from childhood to adulthood, usually I like to say that we didn't build these habits overnight. We're not going to change them in a week. It's something that takes a lot of work and patience as we try and, unlearn some of these maybe less healthy habits. So I like to try to say avoid overhauling this person's whole diet as you try to navigate these issues. Like you as a parent or a caregiver might be able to look at what your loved one eats in a day and say, okay, for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks and beverages, like we have areas that we could improve. I would just say avoid trying to tackle every single area at once. Trying to start with maybe smaller goals that are definitely more realistic for our patients. And one thing that I try to do with our clients is to involve our patients in goal setting as much as we possibly can. Get their thoughts on it, what they think might be realistic for them. If it is maybe like eating the same thing for lunch every single day, that's maybe not the healthiest option, or we'd like to have a little bit more variety. A couple things that we could try to do would be, one, could we switch that like to a healthier option? Like if it is like a chicken patty or a burger, could we maybe try to have like grilled chicken tenders instead? And could we maybe only try to do this like 1 or 2 days a week instead of trying to change every single day right up front? It's just a little bit more realistic, and it gives us like that sense of accomplishment for our patients when they're able to achieve these smaller goals. Kind of gives them the confidence to keep working towards the ultimate goal, which would be to have a lot of variety there.
Yeah. And I think, right, that setting of expectations, I think just for all of us in the general population, here we are as we record this, we're several months out from New Year's resolutions that have been set. And if we, in the general population, even try to set too broad of a goal and make too many changes all at once, it's never going to happen. And I think the same thing as you're describing it here so well is it's so important for us to recognize that we can't expect our friends with Down syndrome to make a million changes all at once, but setting those goals, attainable goals, is so important. One goal that this particular emailer had mentioned to us was that their loved one has a real reliance on restaurants, loves going out to eat. And while they're there, they seem to always pick from the unhealthy options on the menu. So how would you address that? Like, how do you address like restaurant eating and behaviors around that?
Yeah, this is something that's also very common with our patients, just because eating out at restaurants can be such a big like social kind of like, we go with our friends, we go with our family. It is such a big like social aspect of our lives that, one, we absolutely don't want to take that away. It really is like kind of more of like a staple of our culture. But there are definitely some things we could do to try to encourage healthier choices. And one of those things that I like to try to work on with our patients and their families is I'll try to get our caregivers or our parents to, even maybe like if you have restaurants and places you like to go pretty frequently, maybe look at the menu ahead of time and have your loved one with Down syndrome look with you, like involve them in this process so that they feel like they're getting to make the choice, and maybe working together to narrow down like 3 healthier options from this restaurant, and then kind of presenting those as the options, like letting them pick from there. Like, they worked with you in the process to identify choices that might be healthier, and then still letting them have the final say in what they're going to be eating. Really gives them a sense of empowerment. Yeah,
right. I think that's fantastic. And I guess one thing with the restaurants too is that it seems that the menus very often will tout the higher calorie things and things like that. And so I love the idea of looking at that menu beforehand and making those decisions beforehand. For somebody who perhaps has a brother who's 48 and has Down syndrome and has some pretty ingrained eating habits himself, is it ever too late for someone with Down syndrome? Is it ever too late to try to make modifications to the diet?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely never too late. Like I said earlier before, we don't build these habits overnight, so it might take a little bit of extra effort to make these changes later down the road, but there is always room for improvement. And I think there's always the ability. I think that's one thing that, especially like working with our patients' populations, like sometimes people tend to underestimate them, but it's really, they can do anything that they put their minds to. And as long as you know you have that support and encouragement, I think that it's never too late.
That's great. Yeah, because like I said, in the pediatric center, when the kids are 3, 4, or 5, maybe starting some unhealthy eating habits, it's very easy for me to say something along the lines of, well, they're not going grocery shopping and they can't open the fridge themselves. And so it's pretty easy. If you don't buy it, they can't eat it type of thing. But one area this particular emailer mentioned as well, and other families have mentioned too, is this idea of the older person, perhaps the 10, 12 adult-year-old person with Down syndrome who goes down and sneaks food, perhaps from the fridge or the cabinets, maybe some empty containers being found under the bed as like evidence of what they've done overnight. How do you address that type of food sneaking kind of behaviors?
Yeah, this is a common issue, but also something that can be like more of a difficult situation to deal with because it is very complex. We'll say like that this person probably isn't just sneaking food because they're hungry. It's a little bit deeper than that. A lot of the times when we have issues with like food sneaking or food hoarding, a lot of the times it's trying to fill some other type of emotional need. So one thing that I'll always advocate for is in these types of situations, having like a multidisciplinary approach, like involving your physician, involving a registered dietitian, behavior therapist, so that you can kind of tackle these behavior issues from all angles. One thing too, if these kind of behaviors are happening more at night, we can kind of see that our patients might be feeling a little bit of lack of control, especially when we're working with our patients with Down syndrome. We think oftentimes they have so many people either making decisions for them or others that are heavily involved in their decisions. So they don't really have a lot of control sometimes. And then this is something that's been a little bit exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, as we lost even more of the choices that we had before. So it can be more of a difficult issue, especially if we're having these behaviors overnight. It's likely because the patient knows that this behavior would be frowned upon by their family or their parents or whoever they live with. So they're trying to like get these behaviors out of their system, I guess, at a time of the day where they won't be caught, for lack of a better word. One thing that we can try to do in this situation is we're talking about like some type of emotional need we're trying to fill with eating. And if we could try and fill that need with something else, maybe if it's like just starting with implementing another activity that the person enjoys at that time, is sometimes a good place to start. Another thing is to make sure that the person is not feeling hungry. Because even if they are just feeling a little bit hungry, it might be like a time of day where it's easy for us to get out of control. Like if I was feeling a little bit hungry, well, now I just like really overate and took maybe way more than I was supposed to. So making sure that they're not feeling hungry at those times. And one way that we can do this is to involve them in preparing a healthy snack that is going to be given at around that time. I like to say involve them in the choices as much as possible. Just so that they feel like they have that sense of control, and it can be empowering and building those self-efficacy skills. So involving them in planning out a healthy snack just to make sure that they're not feeling hungry at those times.
That's great. And there may or may not be a right or wrong answer to this question, but your thoughts on things like locks that you can buy for the fridge or cabinets and things like that, just for to reduce perhaps the temptation for that type of behavior. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on this are a little bit difficult because one, yes, you are doing something that is helping the person to stop this behavior, but two, you're also still kind of taking away that aspect of control from them. Like, so it's a difficult balance kind of.
Yeah.
So if it's something that's necessary, it's something that you do, but I think trying to get away from that and working towards not having to have those types of restrictions would be best.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the idea that it would build their future ability to make decisions that on their own that would be best for them, right? And so take the initiative of, okay, well, I'm going to lock this. Well, then what do you do when they're at the friend's house, or when maybe one day you're not there? And, so it's important I love the idea of the team approach, including that person with Down syndrome, to make these decisions. I think is great. Wow. I think, Shannon, we really went through, I think, pretty much all the questions that this particular listener had. Are there any kind of last minute thoughts you want to share, or anything that you want to say overarching that would kind of encompass what we've talked about today?
Yeah, I think as far as last thoughts, kind of like we said, it's never too late to start, and just encouraging this person in your life with Down syndrome that, you care about them, you're there to support them in all of the healthy choices that they're going to try to make.
Yes, thank you. And I think hopefully our listeners, you've had a chance to listen to our last podcast with Shannon about nutrition and diet options and choices in people with Down syndrome. There's really great information there as well. And as you might imagine, now having had 2 podcasts with Shannon on this podcast, we really appreciate the level of knowledge and expertise that she brings to our center. Currently, Shannon's work is through our adult center, and we would love to continue that at the adult part of our center. And we'd also love to perhaps have some nutrition and dietitian support through our pediatric center as well. So we are looking into those types of options. Really, these options come along because of philanthropy. Everything that we do at our Down Syndrome Center here in Western Pennsylvania, everything that we do is because of philanthropy. And so we are so grateful for those who have given through this podcast. You've heard about our center, and you've given through our website, which is www.givetochildrens.org/Down Syndrome Center. And we would love to have you join us in that way. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to address on the podcast that we haven't addressed, or you'd like more information on, please do, just like this listener did, send us an email to downsyndromecenter@chp.edu. I do read each and every one of those emails. And oftentimes, a few months after that email comes in, you'll see a podcast that comes out on that topic because you asked for it. But until next time, bye-bye.